All right. We are actually live today, Friday, before a big weekend of college hoops. Hunter, the first Saturday where college football season's on pause. Obviously, we got Army Navy, always great on the kind of Saturday after college football season ends. But this also looks like the week that teams decided now's the time to get college basketball on the forefront. So I look forward to talking about that today. And first time we've chatted on here since you made your debut at Madison Square Garden on Tuesday night for the Jimmy V Classic. How's that?
Jim V Classic was awesome. Seeing FAU and Illinois go after it, we got that pick out for Illinois. They took care of business. They dominated that game really. But then the main event, UConn UNC, was crazy. It was a crazy environment. Felt like an NCAA tournament game in there. UConn really made it feel like a home game. UNC traveled well. A lot of people came out for that one. UConn looks the part of a team that could repeat as national champions. UNC, they have some issues they need to work through. They need more consistent shooting on the outside. Our guy Harrison Ingram needs to get fed more. And Armando Bacot looked a little slow out there. So maybe he was just having an off night, but didn't look like one of the 5 best players in the country, like the odds suggest for the Wooden Award right now.
Yeah, and we'll get to those futures markets in just a few seconds here, kind of today. Spend a little bit of time looking at the futures for the first time since we did that before the season started. Now they've got about a month of the season in our back pocket, and with conference play kicking off in certain conferences, we'll kick off here in a few weeks in others, and then getting to this big weekend slate where there's just a variety of big matchups, and we at least have the odds out from DraftKings, so we can start to look at those. Obviously, come to the site, cbb.vincerix.com tomorrow morning to get those best odds for those games as the rest of the books deliver those lines. But yeah, let's start with the futures market. And you just mentioned the player of the year market, which wasn't one that we necessarily looked at before this season, but definitely a fun one to keep eyes on. And all these odds today will be coming from DraftKings. Top of that market, we've got Zach Edey plus 130. I think obviously before the season would have been the favorite there. Hunter Dickinson plus 300. Also Hunter Dickinson suspended, I saw, for 3 games. I didn't actually see what he did. What happened? Did you see what happened?
Yeah, he got a pretty bad flagrant foul where he threw a guy to the ground, like just 2-hand slammed him into the hardwood. Did not look good. Definitely a flagrant foul. Definitely a flagrant 2.
And you're on the record that his post college basketball career should already be in WWE. So
yeah, it was a WWE move. Like once he's done with college basketball, he can go be the next great villain in WWE.
He's plus 300. Kyle Filipowski plus 800. Armando Bacot plus 1600. Donovan Clingan plus 1800. Tyler Kolek plus 2500. Trying to see where the rest of the these odds, I'll pull them up here. But any of those guys just kind of at the top interesting to you, or do you feel like this is Zach Edey's award and we're just counting down the days until the season's over?
Yeah, it feels like it's Zach Edey's award unless he gets hurt. But I think one guy to look at is Tyler Kolek. He has the opportunity to be the best player in the Big East, and the Big East has the opportunity to be the most, I mean, not best conference, that's going to be the Big 12, but the most top heavy. So if Tyler Kolek can go out there and keep putting up, 27-5 every night and Marquette wins the Big East, I think he's going to have an opportunity to win the award. And then the other thing also is like injuries always in the cards, especially for a big man. I'm surprised to see Tyler Kolek down at plus 2,500. Like, I feel like he should be number 2 right now. I don't think Hunter Dickinson's going to win National Player of the Year. I know there's a lot of hype around Filipowski, but I feel like that's more like NBA hype than like National Player of the Year type of hype. And then I just don't see it for Donovan Clingan. Like, I'm not even sure he's the most important player on his team.
Yeah, and I'm seeing, there's other guys up here too, like Tyson Walker. He's not winning. I mean, he's been fantastic this year, but Michigan State continues to just be miserable. Dalton Connect, if Tennessee, so he's 30-1 right now. If Tennessee turn their, not that they've had a bad season, most of their losses have been against good teams. He's fantastic. If Tennessee went on some sort of run in SEC play, I think at 30-1, he could move up there. You got Trey Alexander at 50-1, who I'm trying to see the odds for. Again, we're talking about some long shots here that Illinois would need to have a tremendous run in Big Ten play. But both Terrence Shannon, specifically Terrence Shannon, just because he's the star player for Illinois, but also our boy now, Marcus Damask. Terrence Shannon's legit. KenPom has him right now as number 4 overall in his rankings. I'm trying to see what his odds are. He's not in these top numbers, but if there's a long number on him, Illinois is good enough. They've only got that one loss to Marquette so far, and what we saw from him in person, he's the type of player who could just have a dominant season and at least get into the conversation, I think.
Yeah, and then being in the Big Ten with Purdue as well, I think you have to look at everyone's going up against Edey for this award. But if Illinois were to go out and win the Big Ten and Terrence Shannon was to be the best player on that Illini team, you could definitely see an argument. It's going to be hard, though. Edey he's getting 20 plus and 10 plus every single night, and the entire offense runs through him. I mean, Purdue looked absolutely unbeatable at Mackey. So it's going to be tough, but talk about a long shot. I think you're going to need an injury, but that happens in college basketball.
Yeah, and it looks like he's 80-1. I'm seeing, and you look at a lot of these guys ahead of him, I don't think they have any chance of winning. And to your point, if it's really Zach Edey, if he stays healthy, or if Purdue wins the Big Ten, he's going to win it. At least to your point, Illinois or another team in the Big Ten could take out Purdue, and in the mind of voters could elevate a player like Terrence Shannon. He's 80-1. Also at 80-1 is Omar Bello for Arizona. And again, is he going to be the best player in the country this year? Probably not. But if Arizona goes undefeated or has some crazy great season, somebody on their team is at least going to be in the discussion. So I think if you're looking to bet this market, you probably want to avoid some of those guys who are in the 50-1 or below range, just because it's Zach Edey there or not. I'd shoot some darts down the board on some of these guys who teams could be top 5 teams in the country come the end of the year. And again, someone like Illinois who actually has the chance to go up against Purdue. And if Terrence Shannon twice against Purdue plays better than he does, at least there's an argument there.
Yeah, and I mean, this is relevant because the Heisman's coming up, but the Wooden Award is more of a team-based award than the Heisman per se. The Heisman, you can fill it up on the stat sheet like an RG3 did, and you can win the Heisman. But the Wooden Award, it's usually from one of the best teams in the country. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yep, and we'll keep our eyes on that market, but probably not the most exciting if Zach Edey continues to just be one of the most dominant players in the history of college basketball. But I think these conference futures are exciting, especially the first conference we'll talk about, who for me is far and away the best conference at this point. That is the Big 12. Just looking at them in our Vincerix composite index, we've got Houston as the number 1 team in the country. BYU is 7. Baylor 8, Kansas 9, Iowa State 17, Oklahoma 21, TCU 27, Cincinnati 30, Houston, BYU, Baylor, Oklahoma, and TCU, and Cincinnati all undefeated so far this season. The Big 12 is always 1A or 1B as one of the best as the best basketball conference in America. They've almost taken it to another level this year. And when we look at these futures, Kansas plus 180, Houston plus 350, Baylor plus 700, Texas plus 850, TCU plus 1,000, BYU plus 1,200. I don't actually think that BYU necessarily can win the Big 12, but we look at the statistics so far. And when you have a team who statistically, both in our rankings and in other rankings, is a top 2 to 3 team in the conference, and they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the odds, that's the one that jumps out to me here as at least worth a look.
Yeah, definitely worth a look. I'm surprised that they're not ahead of teams like Texas and TCU. For me, I think you can draw a line after Baylor. I think it's a 3-horse race between Kansas, Houston, and Baylor. But if I had to pick a 4th team, I would take BYU over a Texas or a TCU for sure.
And I think talking about BYU, they were one who jumped out looking at the national championship odds is too. Again, is BYU going to win the national championship? Probably not. But just the statistical profile that they've put together this year, it may actually be better. I'm looking now that to make the Final Four, BYU is plus 1,600. They, to me, might be more likely to make the Final Four than they would to win the Big 12, just because the Big 12 is so competitive and so top heavy that, I mean, I can't even count how many teams are in front of them in the Final Four odds here. This has to be 20, 30 some teams that are ahead of BYU and odds to make the Final Four. The way they play too, where they can just get streaky and hot from 3-point range, they'll likely get a good seed because they could lose 6-8 games in the Big 12, and based on how they've done in the non-conference, still be a top 4 or 5 seed line in the tournament. I kind of like BYU in all of these different markets, but honestly, they may be more interesting in something like a Final Four market versus the Big 12 itself.
Yeah, when it comes to the tournament, You got to look at teams that when they get hot, they can beat anybody. Like there's certain types of teams that are really good and they're really consistent, but they don't have that level to become great. BYU plays a style of basketball where if they're playing at their peak, they can knock off anyone in the country because they're such great shooters from the outside. They share the ball so well. I definitely like to take that. I mean, the Big 12 is just so deep that there's a lot of teams that, I mean, I definitely think Kansas, Houston, Baylor could all win the national championship. I don't think anyone should be surprised. And then there's, like we've talked about, Oklahoma. They're like a top 15 team right now, and they're not even getting talked about. Big 12, there's a lot of teams that can make a run towards the Final Four.
And who, I mean, Kansas is plus 180, Houston's plus 350, Baylor plus 700. Is Kansas your favorite still in the Big 12? Or do you have one of these other teams? Just, I mean, again, looking at the numbers here, Houston's is kind of the consensus number one from like a computer standpoint right now. Baylor and Kansas is pretty tight. So does the history of Kansas still have them as the favorite for you?
I like Houston. Like, I think it would be a great story if Houston came in the Big 12 and shook things up. They've looked so good on the defensive end this year. Kelvin Sampson has reloaded. LJ Cryer's a great addition coming over from Baylor. He's knocking down shots for them. I think at plus 350, it's good value. Like, as we look at some of the other conferences, you'll see that the odds on favorites are like plus 300. So if you can get a plus 350 on Houston, knowing that they need to knock off Kansas and Baylor, and really the odds are showing that it's a 3-horse race, I like that value. I mean, I like Houston or Baylor to make a run at Kansas this year. Like, this isn't – Kansas has Hunter Dickinson. They have Kevin McCullough. They have DeJuan Harris. But, like, who are the other guys that can step up for them? KJ Adams is good, but he's not ball dominant. And then they have such a short bench. Like, if Kansas suffers any sort of injuries, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think I like, if you want to place the future in the Big 12, any of these teams outside, I mean, TCU at 10-1, that makes no sense. They played no one, barely survived Georgetown on an insane buzzer beater. So hat tip to them for that. But I mean, Oklahoma is 40-1 to win the Big 12. The top of the Big 12 is too good, but Oklahoma is a great team, and 40-1 to win their conference. There's going to be a lot of 40-1 teams in these other conferences that have absolutely no shot. Oklahoma is good enough to at least contend. And
I mean, and you look at like Iowa State last night, they go and they blow out Iowa by 25. Iowa State's like, they're like plus 10,000 to win the Big 12. Like, the Big 12 is so deep that going on the road this year, like if a Kansas, a Houston, or Baylor dropped a game at Iowa State and Hilton, I don't think anyone should be surprised. Like, I think the reason that I like a Houston or a Baylor this year is because, like, even if Kansas defends home floor and doesn't lose a game in Allen Fieldhouse, there's games that you could go drop on the road for sure in this Big 12 conference. So,
yeah, I agree. And I was just going to say about Houston, and I've said this before, if you're a bad basketball team who has a bye game against Houston, it remains one of, I think, the most miserable experiences they could possibly have. They added Rice to the list of teams that they've absolutely hammered in home games this year. 75-39 over Rice. Rice couldn't even get to 40 points. They've now held 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every home game so far for Houston, they've held teams under 50 points. Now, to be fair, they're not playing very good teams, but Houston is being dominant. They play Jackson State next. That'll be another one where they'll dominate. They're crushing the unders, only 12.5% overs for them so far this year. So Houston's this could be the best Houston team of many consecutive years of Kelvin Sampson having great Houston teams. It'll be exciting to see how they stack up once Big 12 play starts. And they don't really play anybody. I mean, they play Texas A&M on 2 Saturdays from now, but they even have an easy kind of start to the Big 12 slate. So
yeah, and just looking at their defense, they're third in the country in defensive effective field goal percentage. They're third in the country in 2-point percentage. They're fourth in the country in turnover percentage. They're turning you over 1 out of every 4 possessions. And then they're actually like almost dead last in the country in assists per field goals made. It's 2/3 of the buckets against them have to be assisted. But I think that speaks more to how good they are in on-ball defending. Like, you are not beating Houston off the dribble.
Yep. No, I saw that earlier, and that's exactly what I thought. And it's actually interesting. You sort by the top defensive teams. Most of them force you to play in isolation. They have low or high assists per field goals made. Houston's the exact opposite, because you literally cannot score on them in one-on-one basketball. Your only hope is to pass the ball. So I agree. I think for me, Houston is my current favorite in the Big 12, which is kind of crazy to say knowing the history of Kansas, but we'll see how things play out. And to be fair, Kansas has played a much better schedule and is more battle tested at this point than Houston. So
Yep.
Interesting things to watch there. The Big East, we were excited about before the season. We're still excited about it. But outside of these top three teams, it's extremely top heavy in the Big East this year. I think when you look at it, not maybe the depth that it has been in recent years. UConn 4, Creighton 5, Marquette 6 in our VCI, and then it dropped down to Villanova, who is 27. Unfortunately, Villanova loses again on a tough step back 3 from Kansas State. They played well. They kind of lived up to they played good against good teams and bad against bad teams, but didn't get enough to cover the spread. And then it's a drop off. You've got Providence, St. John's, Butler, Xavier, Seton Hall in the 40 to 70 range, and then Georgetown and DePaul.
Cellar dweller. They are horrible.
DePaul is absolutely miserable, but top heavy. And because of that, we see that reflected in the odds. Marquette plus 220, UConn plus 250, Creighton plus 400. Give me UConn at plus 250 there. Until proven otherwise, UConn, to me, the team, and I said this before the season, at least in this case, UConn remains the team to beat for me in the Big East.
Yeah, I think one thing about the Big East is we knew the teams at the bottom were not good, but I think we expected more depth. Like, I think coming into the season, we were like, oh, there's 5 to 6 teams that could win this conference, like Creighton, Villanova, if they figure it out. But it's really, to me, looking like a 2-horse race. Like, it's UConn or Marquette. And I see UConn, but like, I could see Marquette winning this conference. Marquette has looked so good. I think when you look at the head-to-head matchup, like Oso Ighodaro, he could match up with Klingon really well. And then it's going to come down to that guard play. And as good as UConn's guards are, I just wonder if Marquette's athleticism could give them issues. But Marquette and UConn could both make the Final Four, and no one should be surprised.
Yeah, and then I think Creighton's interesting because Creighton's they're number 5 in the VCI. A lot of the computer rankings are still really high on Creighton. They lost that game to Colorado State. They got blown out by Colorado State. At the time, that looked like a really bad loss for Creighton. But Colorado State's looked really good since then. Colorado State still undefeated. And since then, they beat Oklahoma State, who's not good, but they beat Nebraska on the road. Both of those wins over Oklahoma State and Nebraska on the road. They've beaten Iowa. So they were hyped coming into the season. This was supposed to be the best Creighton team yet. They suffered that Colorado State loss, kind of threw us off the scent there for a little bit, but they've been rounding back into form. Their next big test is going to be a couple Saturdays from now against Alabama, and then they'll play Villanova and Marquette to start Big East play before the end of the year. So they're going to get tested right out of the gates. But if we believe in the stats, we believe in the numbers, we believe in the computers, which I tend to do, they're still high on Creighton, and I think we should not be too down on them yet until we see them match up against some of these top Big East opponents.
Yeah, one thing I think sticks out, there's a juxtaposition. When you think of Big East basketball, you think of tough, you think of physical. Creighton is number 1 in the country at not allowing free throw attempts, 13.9% free throw attempt per field goal attempt. So they play without fouling. That's a staple of McDermott's defense. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue that into Big East play, where you just see that physical brand of basketball. But yeah, they're good on the defensive end. They're also first in the country in 3-point attempts per field goal attempt, only 23.5%. So they're running teams off the 3-point line and they're not fouling them, which is really impressive. I think when you think of Creighton, you think of like offense getting up and down the court, but don't sleep on that defense.
Yeah, and I think they're a team that'll match up very well with a team like Marquette. I think Creighton and Marquette are relatively similar style teams, and actually with Kalkbrenner on the inside, I think there might be an edge there for Creighton. So to me, again, I'll stick with UConn just because I think like Creighton and Marquette match up pretty well. I mean, the UConn Marquette matchup maybe leans the Marquette style of play. So those 3 teams, it's still UConn for me, but I get why these odds reflect them all still tightly bunched there.
I think one thing that's safe is like you can draw the line on those 3, and that wasn't what we thought coming into the year. Like, I think you could have talked yourself into a Villanova as a long shot, but it's really looking like a 3-horse race.
Yep, I agree with that. And moving on to just to quickly touch on a couple of these conferences where the odds are not as competitive. The Pac-12, Arizona's plus 110 to win there. USC's plus 450. UCLA's plus 600. It will be if that UCLA number is a little bit interesting to me. They've been fine. They've lost those couple of games in Maui, but they've taken care of business against everybody else. But Arizona, another conference where we thought it might be a little bit more competitive at the top. I think it's clear at this point that Arizona is far and away the class of the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, I like Arizona at plus money there. Like UCLA at the end of the year in the back half of the conference could be right there with them, but they have freshmen that they need to develop and they're not there. And like I could see them dropping, especially going on the road early in conference play. I don't see it with USC. Isaiah Collier's their best player and he's a freshman. Oregon seems down this year. I mean, Dana Altman aligns Rubik's cubes or whatever John Rothstein says, and like Oregon's always one of those teams where you don't like them to win the Pac-12, but you love them to win the Pac-12 tournament because they can figure that out. But yeah, I like Arizona at plus money. Like Arizona's far and away the best team in the conference. I don't see them losing a home game. Definitely not dropping one at McHale. And yeah, they've got the older guys: Caleb Love, Umar Ballo, Johnson, that transferred from San Diego State. Like they have guys that know how to win, and they're already the best team in the conference talent wise. So love Arizona.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at the Pac-12 and the BCI, of all of these Power 5 conferences, the gap between the top team and the next team is the biggest in the Pac-12. Arizona's third. The next closest team is actually Colorado at 31st, and then there's a handful of Pac-12 teams bunched between like 30 and 60. But Arizona is far and has the biggest in these conferences. They're the clear kings of the conference.
The Pac-12 in their final year doing their best to become like a 2-bid league. Like this is. They're not. The Pac-12 is not picking up any big out of conference wins.
No, it's been terrible. I mean, yeah, like just looking at the Pac-12, the best wins. The Arizona obviously has that win over Duke. Duke's number 20. The next best win in the Pac-12 is Oregon beat somebody who is number 60. So like, there's just no good wins in the conference. All the average wins are all sky high. It's been a tough non-conference slate for the conference. Another conference where we thought it'd be a little bit top heavy, and it probably is, but I mean, Purdue already has a loss, and they have something in the loss column at least. They're 2 in the VCI: Wisconsin 16, Illinois 18, Ohio State 26, Michigan State 35, Northwestern 42. The futures here have Purdue at, where is Purdue here? I don't know. I don't see Purdue. Stand by for Big Ten.
In New York, I don't think you can get Big Ten futures because there's a New York team involved.
That could do it. So stand by. We'll get the Big Ten futures here in a second. In the meantime, we'll talk about a conference that definitely doesn't have any New York teams, and that is the SEC. Another conference where this one probably it was pretty competitive from an odd standpoint before the season, and not much has changed. I don't think anybody has proven themselves as the clear class of the SEC during this non-conference part of the season. Tennessee plus 300, Kentucky plus 350, Texas A&M plus 500, Arkansas plus 750, Alabama plus 850, Florida plus 1,000, Auburn plus 1,000, Mississippi State plus 1,500. We've talked about the SEC from time to time on here. We've said who we thought our best teams in the SEC were, and then it seems like once we talk about it, that team goes out and loses a game that they should have won. What's your current take on the SEC, and do any of those numbers interest you?
I think the SEC as a whole is not as good as we were expecting it to be. I think a lot of those teams that we thought were at the start of the season were going to be really, really solid. They've shown some weaknesses. Looking at the VCI though, like Tennessee, Alabama, Texas A&M, Auburn, Kentucky, all in the top 25. So definitely still computer darlings. A lot of the teams like Alabama's top 10 in effective field percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage. So Alabama's great on offense. Once again, Kentucky also top 5 in effective field goal percentage, 3-point percentage. Shout out Reed Shepherd. Like he can't miss. Give me Texas A&M still. Like I gave out Texas A&M. They offensive rebound like 40% of the shots. They get their own rebounds. I just think in the SEC, it's going to be a lot more grinding it out this year. And that's really Buzz Williams style basketball.
Yeah, I agree. And Texas A&M, they haven't really lost any what you'd consider bad games. They lost that game to Virginia on the road. That's not that big of a deal. They lost to FAU on a neutral floor, and we saw FAU in that game against Illinois, and they have so many guys who can beat you. FAU is just going to be a tough matchup every single time you play them. If they get hot from 3, there's nothing you can really do about it, and that's what happened in that game. We're going to find out. We'll talk about it in a second here. I mean, Alabama's upcoming games are Purdue, Creighton, Arizona. So Alabama's going to be getting tested here in their next few games. So it's one of those things where like the computers still really like Alabama. As
Yeah.
you were saying, they're number 13 right now in the VCI. They're still highly ranked in Ken Palm. Their offensive numbers still remain really good. They're ninth in effective field goal percentage. They're ninth in three-point percentage. They're knocking down their free throws, and as they tend to do, they're getting to the free throw line a lot. They're 10th in free throw attempts in the country per field goal attempt, and then 7th in free throw percentage. So this highly efficient Alabama offense, which has been the cornerstone under Nate Oates in recent years, it still seems like it's there. They may not be the defensive team that they've been in recent years, but if it plus 850 is the 5th odds here in the conference when the numbers still are speaking pretty highly of them. Lots of time for them to get it figured out, and they're going to play these 3 tough games here. If they could pick off one of those and boost their confidence, that number is going to go down. So for me, I'd probably go there, even though I can't say that I've watched a lot of Alabama this year, and I'm kind of just, and a lot of those numbers are holding over a little bit from what they did last season. But Nate Oates has been great at Alabama. They've been fantastic in the SEC under him. I think that one's probably the most enticing for me there.
Yeah, and I think the SEC, like if you're looking at a conference where you want to throw a dart and take a long shot, I think it's the SEC. Like the SEC is wide open, and there's so many teams that could beat one another that I think it's another conference where it's not going to be some team that's like 18-2 that wins it. Like it's going to be a 4 or 5 loss team probably. That these teams are going to beat up on each other. I mean, you look at Mississippi State, who's seventh. They're top 10 in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage allowed. So that's going to be a tough game. You even get down to like a Missouri, Kevin Gates. That's always a tough place to go play. South Carolina looks improved. Florida looks good, like a tournament team under Todd Golden.
So Miss is undefeated with Chris Beard.
Yeah, don't cheer for that team, but yeah, they are undefeated.
Yeah, no, I think to your point, the SEC, there's no of these conferences we've talked about. This is the first one with nobody in the top 10 of the VCI. Tennessee is 10, so they are technically in the top 10, but no one in the single digits of the VCI. A bunch of teams clustered. It shows in the odds that the favorite's plus 300. So that's already a sign that, at the top, there's not a lot of confidence. So yeah, definitely wanted to take a dart. And the other thing about this conference is these road environments are going to be tough. All these teams play a very intense style of basketball, and the crowds are there too. We saw that when Duke went down to Arkansas. So the SEC will remain one to watch just all year long because it's going to be highly competitive. And I agree. Watch these numbers early in the conference slate and keep an eye on a team like Alabama over these next 3 games, because if they pick up a win or 2 over a Purdue and Arizona or Creighton, they're instantly going to go from someone who's been looking good in the numbers to all of a sudden everybody's talking about Alabama again, even though they've been a little bit quiet about them so far this year. Yeah,
definitely. Plus 850 could be a good ticket to hold. Like that number could improve quite a bit, and then you could do quite a few things to hedge.
And the last of the big conferences, one that actually is better than I think maybe when we've talked about some of these conferences not as deep as we thought they were. I think the ACC actually has had a reasonably solid non-conference slate, at least among the top handful of teams. It drops off a little bit quickly, but we were talking about this as just Duke and North Carolina and maybe Virginia on the fringes. But another conference like the SEC where the top's not in the top 10 of the VCI. North Carolina's first right now at 15th. And you got Duke at 20, Virginia 23, Clemson 24, Miami 33, and then Pittsburgh at 43. And that's kind of where the line gets drawn before it drops off into the Virginia Tech, NC State, Wake Forest piece of the puzzle. And the odds there, Duke plus 250, North Carolina plus 280, Miami plus 450. Miami, a team that continues to be hyped by
the media,
but the stats don't back it up. Virginia plus 650, and then Clemson plus 650. And yeah, then it really jumps off to Virginia Tech at plus 2,500. I've been high on North Carolina. I still like the roster. It was very concerning, some of the things that we saw in person there on Tuesday night. Our friend Mike Popper, our colleague, this Virginia team, we talked about them before the season, and we know what they've done in the ACC. They're sneaking up in the VCI towards the top of this conference. They're 8-1. That lone loss coming to Wisconsin, that doesn't seem like a bad loss. Now, for me, Virginia, probably the most interesting of these top teams in the ACC.
Yeah, I like Virginia as well. And it's just because we don't know what UNC and Duke are to this point. But we know what Virginia's going to be. Like, Virginia's going to struggle to score the ball this year. They don't really have that NBA score that they've had in years past to pair with the defense, but you know what they're going to be like. They're going to be a top 5 defensive team in the country. So I just trust their brand and their identity. I think UNC and Duke are still both trying to figure it out. And Virginia knows who they are. Like, Tony Bennett has a style of basketball that they're going to play. So yeah, give me Virginia at the better number than Duke or UNC.
Yeah, and I think too, to your point, this Virginia defense is the Virginia defense that we've come to know under Tony Bennett. It's fourth in the country in defensive efficiency. They're 360th in pace. This is Tony Bennett basketball, and we know what they're going to bring on the defensive side of the ball. And when you look at the defensive metrics, I mean, they are far and away the best team defensively in the ACC. There's not another team in the Pittsburgh 60th in defense, and then nobody else in the top 100. Virginia's second in effective field goal percentage, fifth in 2-point defense, third in block percentage. So they're far and away the best defense in this conference. And I think they have the tools on offense to score enough. I mean, they're 19th right now in 3-point percentage. They are assistant. They're 10th in assists in the country. So the Virginia offense has continued to look like it can improve as the season goes on. They've got Reese Beekman as well. And then Isaac McNeely is shooting 58% from three. So Virginia, give me Virginia here. Their lone loss coming to Wisconsin, who we have as the number 16 team in the country right now. So I'll take Virginia here with you at plus 650 in the ACC. Looks like we've lost Hunter for just a moment, so I will continue on here in the conference breakdowns until he gets back with us. A couple ones to just point out here in the AAC. Florida Atlantic has moved to minus 110. That was a conference where I believe Memphis was the slight favorite to start the year. Memphis plus 200 there, and then a deep drop off after that to Tulane, Wichita State, and UAB. One that, in another conference where we talked about it before the year and has quickly moved in the direction that we kind of expected. Gonzaga's moved to minus 200 in the WCC. St. Mary's at plus 240. Even at minus 200, there might be some value there on the Zags, who appear to be far and away the best team in the WCC again this year. And then there's also the Mountain West Conference, where San Diego State right now is the favorite at plus 175. When we look at this conference in the VCI, you've got four teams that are tightly bunched. Colorado State's 25th, San Diego State's 29th, New Mexico is 34th, and Nevada is 38th. Both Colorado State and Nevada are undefeated, while San Diego State and New Mexico have played well in this non-conference slate so far, and their losses have come to teams that's not going to be held against them for long. One of those losses for San Diego State coming against a BYU team that is continuing to improve as the season goes on. So for me, the Mountain West here is an interesting one to look at from a betting perspective when you consider San Diego State is the favorite, and that's a little bit probably due to what they did last year and what they've done in the past. But I think any of Colorado State, New Mexico, and Nevada are interesting, with Colorado State probably being the most interesting here at plus 350, considering what they have done so far this season and the fact that they are the leader on paper, at least, ranking number 25 in the VCI. Hunter's back with us. I did a quick run through of some mid-major levels. I quickly touched on the AAC, where FAU has now moved to minus odds there, which I think is fair versus Memphis.
Yep.
And then Gonzaga, they've moved to minus 200. We talked about how that should be. I even said minus 200 is probably value on Gonzaga. I think they're clearly going to win the WCC this year. And then was just touching on the Mountain West, where San Diego State's the favorite at plus 175, but then Colorado State's plus 350, New Mexico plus 500, Nevada plus 600. And with Colorado State being the best on paper so far this year, I think that one's interesting.
Yeah, and then also another team to look at there is Nevada. Like, Nevada's been good. The computers don't like him as much. They're at 38 right now in the VCI. But Nevada, as far as eye test goes, they've looked really good. And the gap is not as big. Like, Colorado State at 25, San Diego State at 29. It's not like these are top 15 teams. So I think there's room for Nevada to sneak up there. But to your point, I like Colorado State over San Diego State with these numbers and value.
Yep. I agree. And I was just taking a quick look at the national championship futures. We talked to touch on the Final Four at the beginning of the show, but Purdue still leads the way. They're plus 1,000. Kansas next, Arizona, UConn, Kentucky, Marquette, Houston, Duke, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Creighton, Baylor. Nothing at the top that interesting, but I think, and we talked about this before the season, this last year was a year where you got all these long shot teams to go to the Final Four, but historically it's been chalky. The year before was really chalky. I think we're looking at another year where things are a little bit more open than they have been historically.
Yeah.
So if there's a team down here in the 40 to 100 to 1 range who you like or looks good on, paper, this is a year where those teams have a fighting chance. I don't think any of these teams at the top of college basketball are dominant. And I'm looking here. There's not one that jumps out to me immediately as one, but I mean, even Virginia, it's 60 to 1, or Wisconsin at 65 to 1. These teams who have gotten off to good starts to the year, those are the type of teams who have a style of play that they kind of hang their hat on that can make runs in March. And I think the futures market from the national championships perspective is interesting because of that.
Yeah, I think it's open. Like Arizona is number 3 team in the country right now per the VCI. Like Arizona hasn't been a team in recent years that, like, if they're a 1 seed, they haven't been a team in recent years that can put it together. So if you're the 8 or 9 seed and you get a shot at them, I think that's one thing we've seen in the past is, like, if you're the 8 or 9 seed and you can get a shot at that 1 seed in the round of 32, if you can knock them off early and hop onto that 1 line yourself, it's a really great opportunity. You also get them before, like, all the fans are traveling. A lot of the 1 and 2 seeds, like, they'll get they get a lot of fans to go to the first round, but a lot of them are waiting for Sweet 16, Elite 8. So yeah, I think it's open field this year. And I think, as we've kind of talked to, like, I really like a Baylor, maybe. I really like teams that have high upside that, who knows if they're going to get hot, but if they get hot, they can shoot their way through the tournament.
Yeah. And also at the same time, a lot of the teams that made runs last year in March Madness were still really long odds, futures wise, before the tournament started. So might be one of those where keep an eye on some teams, have some teams in mind as March rolls around. But to your point, I don't think the 1 seeds or the 2 seeds or the 3 seeds are going to be these world beaters this year. And there's going to be opportunities down the board. And it might be worthwhile as it gets closer to March and we have a better sense of seed lines and things like that. But 1 month into the season, if the question before the season was, is this going to be a chalky year or a wide open year? I don't think it's been proven yet, but I'm leaning on the wide open side just based on some of the results so far.
Yeah.
So that's a quick futures breakdown. But this weekend slate is enticing, and this weekend slate will some of these teams we've talked about, we'll get a better read on them based on what takes place this weekend. And as I said, we do at least have the odds from DraftKings for some of these games. The first one team we've spent a little bit of time talking about, it is Purdue versus Alabama. They are playing in Toronto at the Coca-Cola Coliseum. This is a battle in the VCI of number 2 Purdue and number 13 Alabama. The opening lines here from DraftKings is Alabama +6, Purdue -6, and over under of 164. A battle of offenses here. Purdue and Alabama's offenses both fantastic, and you obviously see that with an over under of 164. Any thoughts initially on this one?
Yeah, homecoming for Zach Edey. He's from Toronto.
Oh, that's the reason for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's why they're playing there. I think there's another game in the Invitational or whatever it is. But yeah, an enticing matchup. We talked about Alabama when we were talking about futures. A huge opportunity for them on a neutral floor to go and knock off Purdue. If I had a side in that one, I'll take Purdue -6. Like, I just trust what I've seen from them a lot more than what I've seen from Alabama to this point. But should be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, and I think, as we've talked about, one of the issues for Purdue, and we saw this pop up against Northwestern, is turnovers. But when Purdue takes care of the ball, they're tough to beat because they're so efficient on offense and they get the ball into Edey. It's going to be a 1-2 kick out or he's going to score. Alabama historically, when I think of them, I think of a high intensity defense trying to get up there, trying to get in passing lanes and things like that. So far this year, they haven't been the most effective defense from a turnover perspective. They're 229th in forcing turnovers. From a rebounding perspective, not the best defensive rebounding team either. They're 112th. We did talk about the free throw side of things for Alabama. They are right now 10th in free throw attempts, Purdue 13th in free throw attempts. You have two teams that like to get to the line, but then on the flip side, you have a Purdue defense that doesn't really foul. They're 25th in free throw attempts. Alabama is 252nd in free throw attempts. So I definitely get why the edge here is with Purdue, both from just the who the teams are, and then you look at the statistics, it backs it up. I'm gonna have to think about this one a little bit. I might have a side tomorrow. Maybe want to see how the odds move a little bit here. I think this number is maybe a little bit of an Alabama line. I think it's a bit lower of a spread than I think people would inherently, lean towards with Purdue. So I'll probably join you on the Purdue side of things, but not yet going to pull the trigger on this one. But a game where Purdue, if they're what they're supposed to be, the number one team in the odds to win the national championship, this one they got to take care of business in.
Yeah, I wish I could get a rim check because that's a high number. If we've got something like the Maui rims in Ontario or Toronto, maybe
if there's is there a game before that game? Let's see here.
There's another game. I don't know which one's
it's
first.
After, unfortunately, but at least we'll get a if Purdue and Alabama can't score, we'll know this is an under, Jim, and we'll be on the under in the TCU and Clemson game that comes up after that. But yeah, I'll probably have a pick for that game, but I'm going to save it for tomorrow because I don't have an initial lean. The next one, this is maybe just as tasty, maybe even more tasty based on what we saw from this Illinois team just a few days ago. We've got Illinois traveling to Tennessee, number 10, Illinois, number 18. Illinois coming off that big win over FAU, and Illinois' lone loss to this point remains to just Marquette. That is a team that Tennessee didn't play in Maui, but Tennessee, all their losses are reasonable. They've lost to all top 15 ranked teams. They get this game at home, and they get the exact same line of the previous game: Tennessee -6, Illinois +6, an over under of 145.5. This is a game we talked about when we were there on Tuesday, and I had a sneaky lean towards Illinois, but you kind of shut me down pretty quick, thinking that Rocky Top in Knoxville, that's not a place that Illinois can go in and take care of business.
Yeah, I think one thing I saw in the Illinois FAU game is they did run it up. They scored 90 points, but it was Marcus Domask going crazy in isolation. Terrence Shannon had a really, really good game for them, but also in isolation. Tennessee is a really good defensive team. Let's look at the stats here.
Yeah, they're middle of the road on the assists per field goals.
Yeah, I don't know. Rocky Top gets going for these home games. It's one of the toughest places in the SEC to play. I think it's probably top 3. I would like Tennessee. I don't know. We've just haven't seen teams go on the road and cover these types of lines yet this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at this one. It's I am concerned about the road environment. I'm also concerned that Illinois is a little one-dimensional on offense with Domask and Shannon. If Tennessee can lock them up, do we know is Connect is okay? Has he been playing? He got hurt in that North Carolina game, but I think he's back, right?
Yeah, I think it was just a rolled ankle.
Okay. Man, this is another tricky. It's tough the day before. I think I got to be in like the mindset of the day of the game. This might be another one where I need to marinate on it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one I'd bet. I don't know. I don't trust Tennessee, but I trust Rocky Top, like Knoxville. It's such a great environment.
Yeah. Also, there's the it's just interesting too, because you got Tennessee 73rd in assists per field goals made. That their offenses, they don't really play isolation. They want to move the ball. They want to get Connect coming off of screens. Connect's really the only guy that they have who can do anything one-on-one. But that's what the Illinois defense wants to take away. They're 9th in assists per field goals made. So I think this Illinois defense stacks up pretty nicely against them. The more I talk about it, it kind of feels like an under type of game.
Yeah, it does feel like an under.
But we've talked about that with Tennessee before. I feel like we've been getting burned on the Tennessee. Tennessee is actually 57% over so far this year, which they feel like another team. Now, on the flip side, Illinois has only gone over 28% of the time so far this year. So I hate to go 2 games so far without a pick, but there's another one I'm going to marinate on. I think I'll have something tomorrow. Kind of want to, again, see how these lines move a little bit since we're only seeing the DraftKings number so far. And we'll probably put something out tomorrow, or at least I'll put something out with some stuff with picks for these games. But again, I think these opening lines for the Tennessee, Illinois, and Alabama Purdue game kind of falling right in that let me think about it side of things. I don't think they're jumping out as clear sides, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
That game's at noon. The Purdue Alabama game's at 1:30, so we're gonna get things right out of the gates. That's CBS. Illinois, Tennessee. That's going to be tasty. I love a good CBS Saturday college basketball game. Doesn't get much better than that for me. Here we go. 3:15 down in Tempe, Arizona, Wisconsin, flying high here. They are white hot. They sucked to start the year. They lost to Tennessee and Providence, and we were saying this Wisconsin team's not very good. They have proved us wrong since then. They beat Virginia. They beat SMU. They beat Marquette. They went on the road and won in Michigan State. Strong rankings both on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. They're playing balanced basketball this year. 16th in the VCI. They are headed down to play at Arizona. The line in this one, Arizona -7.5, Wisconsin +7.5. I think Wisconsin was just +5 in that game that they went on the road and won at Michigan State. Arizona obviously beat Michigan State. Over under here, 147.5. Matt, another tough place to go play basketball down there in Tucson, but Wisconsin's looked pretty good so far.
Yeah, I did see that it's a stripe out in McHale. So got to factor in the stripe out. And because of that, I think I like Arizona to cover in this one. McHale gets crazy. They love their basketball down in Tucson. If you're a Pac-12 fan, you know that's nearly impossible to win in McHale. I like Arizona. I know Wisconsin showed some stuff, but I just feel like in this is the type of game where they can get run out of the gym.
Yeah, an interesting one. The battle here going to be, or I guess it's either a battle or it's not going to be a battle on the rebounding side of things, because both teams are elite rebounding teams. Both teams top 30, both offensive and defensive rebounding. Arizona, their efficiency on just both sides of the ball so far this year has been fantastic. They're not fouling. They're 26th in free throw attempts per field goal attempt on defense. Wisconsin 235th. That's a concern for me in a road environment like this at McHale, and that they've got the stripes. Maybe the stripes on the court go their way as well. The home, as a Pac-12 fan, you know the home whistle down there is going to be going the Arizona way. And then on the offensive side of the ball, both teams, again, solid rebounding, but yeah, the big edge here on the offensive side for Arizona. 3-point shooting, Arizona 46th in the country. They're shooting 37%. Wisconsin 243rd at 31%. 2-point percentage, 42 for Arizona, 141 for Wisconsin. Both teams solid from the free throw line. Both teams middle of the road in taking care of the basketball. And both teams not necessarily shooting a lot of threes. Both outside the top 203 point attempts. So ball's going to go inside. I don't know who Wisconsin's going to have to stop. Corral they've got, but I don't think he's going to stand a chance down there on the interior for Arizona. This feels like kind of a big number, 7.5, but it makes me even like Arizona a little bit more. So this is the first one where I'm going to join you. Wisconsin's been flying high. That's awesome for them. I think they're going to be good this year in the Big Ten. I think Arizona is elite, and I think Arizona, when they win big. So I'll join you there on the Wildcats -7.5.
Yeah, and what I really like about Arizona is they're the number 2 defensive rebounding team in the country, and then they're the number 11th pace team in the country. So they clean the glass and they get out and run in a hurry. And Wisconsin's a team that wants to set up their defense, get into their sets on offense. But games can snowball in McHale. Like, it's kind of like that Warriors Avalanche feel sometimes where Arizona can just get out and run and the threes start falling and it gets crazy. They have those like balloons, the long balloons in the stands. It gets going in there.
Yep. I agree with you. This Arizona team is legit. They've been legit in the regular season under Tommy Lloyd. They've been legit at McHale under Tommy Lloyd. This is a tough road test for Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's already done the job that they need to do. If they win, it's unbelievable. Great for them. They don't need to win this game. They don't even need to really worry about getting too worked up over it. Let's get Arizona take care of business, cover the 7.5. Let's get out. Let's run and gun. Maybe score 100 points against Wisconsin just to remind them of what the Arizona offense is all about.
Hang it on them.
All right. So that's my first bet of the day. Arizona -7.5 tomorrow in McHale against Wisconsin. Back to the schedule here for tomorrow. Let's go to, let's see, what other odds do we have here? Yeah. BYU against Utah. BYU against Utah, the Holy War here in Utah. This game being played at Utah, I do believe.
Yeah, it's a sellout too.
sellout at the Huntsman Center in Salt Lake City. The line, BYU 4-point favorites on the road against Utah. The reason for that being some of the things we see in the stats here. BYU 7th in the VCI, Utah 40. Utah's 6-2. They haven't suffered any catastrophic losses. They lost to Houston by 10. They lost to St. John's by 9. That was on a neutral floor. They beat St. Mary's. Obviously, St. Mary's isn't who we thought they were. They've beaten Wake Forest. Looking at some of the stats here, we know the offensive efficiency at BYU. They're 7th in effective field goal percentage. They're 27th in 3-point percentage. Now, on the flip side of that, Utah's 45th in 3-point percentage. So that 3-point shooting edge maybe canceled out a little bit there. Both teams assist a lot of their baskets. On the defensive side, the concern, I think, if you're Utah here, is you're 324th in 3-point attempts per field goal attempt. If you just give BYU a bunch of open looks from 3, it's going to be a really, really long night for you. We've also got a BYU team on the flip side who runs teams off the 3-point line. They're 46th in 3-point attempts. They crush the glass. They're first in the country in rebounding. They don't foul. It's concerning. -4 on the road in the Holy War. Not one that you get excited about, but I remain convinced that this BYU team is legit.
Yeah, I think this is one where you got to trust the numbers early. Like, it kind of reminds me of like the Kentucky-Miami game where Miami was, there's a big discrepancy with what the computers were saying and people talked themselves into Miami. I think people are going to talk themselves into Utah +4 at home in the rivalry game, but I'm with you. BYU, lay the points.
Yeah, and it's just the matchup of the style of play of BYU versus the defensive style for Utah, because BYU is 10th in 3-point attempts and 6th in assists. Utah, 324th in surrendering 3-point attempts and 271st in assists. The ball's going to be moving around for Utah. They're going to be draining threes. For BYU, they're going to be draining threes. Ball's going to be moving around. I think it'll be a competitive game, but there's just too much firepower from this BYU team. And they also, I don't necessarily love this, they've covered the spread in every single game they've played this year. The market just still hasn't adapted to, I think, how good this BYU team is.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, we're taking a risk there. -4 on the road for BYU, but that'll be my second pick. So Arizona -7.5 for me so far in BYU -4. All right, let's talk about it. The Washington Huskies home game against Gonzaga. Have you seen the line? Do you know what it is?
I don't. Is it even a home game though? Like when Gonzaga takes over Heck Ed every time they come to Seattle?
Not really. What do you think the line is?
Gonzaga -8.5.
So in a way, this is a Husky line. It's only 4.5.
Gonzaga.
Only 4.5. Let's do our due diligence here on the numbers. Gonzaga 11 in the VCI, Washington 54. The Washington offense remains what the offense for Washington has been historically under Mike Hopkins, 106th in effective field goal percentage. Gonzaga's 29th. Washington 228th in 3-point shooting. Gonzaga 94th. Both teams good on the 2 points. Both teams rebounded all right. Washington, surprisingly, for a team who never gets assists on their field goals, is actually doing pretty good this year. McKahee, the pickup of him as is that who you say? It's McKahee, right? Or is it
Mulcahy?
Mulcahy, yeah. Washington up to 71st in assists. Gonzaga tends to take those away, though. They're 38th in taking away the passing lanes. The defense for Gonzaga has been fantastic. 15th effective field goal percentage, 26th 2-point or 3-point, 29th and 2-point. Washington's defense is solid, but they're not rebounding at all. 276th in rebounding. They foul too much. 276th in free throw attempts. Well, I'm not going to bet this game because I'll never bet against the Dogs. I refuse to do that. But I'd be stunned if Washington won.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a big issue on the glass for UW. 276 in the country in defensive rebounding, and then Gonzaga's top 10. They're number 9. They offensive rebound 40% of their misses. UW in the Mike Hopkins era has not rebounded. Like in the zone, haven't rebounded, have switched to man this year, still not rebounding. And Gonzaga just pummels teams on the offensive glass. And I've seen the tape a million times. The threes are falling, and if they're not falling, it's the underneath put back and one. Gonzaga chance gets going in Heckhead. It hurts. Man, if the dogs want any chance of making the tournament, if that still even exists, they need to win this game. This is their last opportunity in the non-conference, and there's just not going to be that many opportunities in the Pac-12. Like, what is the Pac-12 in the VCI right now? It's Colorado's 30, USC's 37, Utah's 40. So you really only have 4 teams that are even in the conversation for a tournament spot right now.
What do we make of this Gonzaga team just in general? Their only loss so far this year is to Purdue. They beat USC. They beat UCLA. They're 2-0 against the Pac-12. They've won 57,000 games in a row against the Pac-12. They're going to play UConn next. They're playing a couple games in Seattle here. They're playing Huskies, obviously. Then they'll play Connecticut next Friday. And then they're going to get a incredibly weak WCC where they could easily go undefeated. I think we're headed towards, unfortunately, another year where Gonzaga is a top 3 seed in the tournament, probably a 3 seed at worst.
Yeah, we've talked about it a little bit, but this is the year that no one was talking about Gonzaga, and it just kind of feels like that story where, like, they're good. Ryan Nemhart's good. Nolan Hickman's good. They have a great backcourt, and then they have Graham Ike in the front court who's looked dominant. Dusty Stromer stepping up as a freshman. Anton Watson dropped 32 in that game. He's looking good. I think they're going to be a 2 seed, if not a 1 seed. Like, Gonzaga's really, really good this year, and I'm afraid they're going to show that against our Dogs tomorrow night.
Yeah, and so they beat Washington, then they play UConn. If they could get a win against UConn in Seattle, which they could do, I mean, UConn's awesome, but that's going to be a big atmosphere for Gonzaga. Obviously, they're at Climate Pledge, and then they literally could win the rest of their games. They could. It's not out of the question that Gonzaga's only lost the whole years to Purdue, and if that's the case, they'll be a 1 seed. Unfortunately,
they're probably a 1 seed if they drop 1 game in the WCC.
Yep.
Especially if they beat UConn.
Oh, actually, and then they've got they're playing at Kentucky on February 10th for some reason. So they'll have a test there. But yeah, unfortunately, we were hoping it would be a down year for Gonzaga. I think deep down we knew that it probably wasn't going to be. There's no such thing as a down year for Marcus Few and the Zags. So going to be a long night probably for the Huskies tomorrow night, but I won't be betting that game because I still want to be able to cheer for the Dogs, although I'm not optimistic. I did think over, but then I saw the over-under is 158, so I wasn't the first one to be thinking over there. They're not expecting a lot of defense to be played in that one. Another one that just caught my eye here, a couple teams that we've talked a reasonable amount on this pod about. Arkansas against Oklahoma. It's a tasty matchup. We've got lines for it already. We've got Arkansas plus 3.5, Oklahoma minus 3.5 in that one. This is 4:00. This is a home game for Oklahoma. Oklahoma coming off a win against Providence. I remain not sold on Arkansas. They beat Duke, but they only beat Duke because it was the most rowdy atmosphere in the history of Arkansas basketball. They really treated it like the national championship, and they got their reward for it. And I think this Oklahoma team is really good. They took care of business for me on a 4.5-point spread against Providence, and I think this is about an equal type of game. This is 21 Oklahoma versus 53 Arkansas. I think it was something similar in that Oklahoma Providence game. The offense for Oklahoma is legit. 9th in 2-point percentage. They are shooting free throws well, but it's the defensive side where I think the big advantage is here. Oklahoma 15th in 3-point defense, Arkansas 265. They don't foul. They're 87th in fouling. Arkansas fouls a ton, 291. I do not like teams that foul a ton on the road. I think that's been something we've seen a reasonable we've seen a reasonable amount of so far this year. I'm just going to keep riding the Oklahoma train. I'm 2-0 betting Oklahoma this year against Power 5 opponents. This is a home game. I don't see any reason why Arkansas would be anything to be afraid of for Oklahoma. So I'm just going to keep riding the Sooners. Give me the Sooners minus 3.5.
Yeah, I love Oklahoma here. And even looking at like the Providence line was 4.5, Providence 41 in our rankings. Oklahoma's 53, Arkansas is 53. I love Oklahoma in this spot. I love them to cover this number at home.
Yeah, it's not going to be too complicated for me. Until proven otherwise, I think I can never say this guy's name. Porter Moser has himself a squad at Oklahoma this year who has efficiency on both sides of the ball. I mean, they're 18th in offensive efficiency and 10th in defensive efficiency. They're undefeated for a reason. This Oklahoma team is good. And I still think this Arkansas team is not good. And I think they rode the crowd to a victory over Duke, and then Duke went and lost on the road at Georgia Tech. So Arkansas yet has done nothing for me to be excited about. I agree. I love this one. Give me Oklahoma -3.5 here.
And that's probably my favorite bet of the night. Like, I love Oklahoma here.
Yep, I do as well. Let's see if there's any other. We're out of spread, so we can just quickly touch on some of the other big games of the day tomorrow. And like I said, I'll put together a little video. Probably we'll toss it up on either Twitter or TikTok with kind of the full slate of games once we have all the best odds, of course, on cbb.vincerix.com. We grabbed a few of those already. Arizona, BYU, and Oklahoma being the ones that I've snagged so far. We got TCU versus Clemson. That game is the follow-up game up there in Toronto. A couple of undefeated teams, I do believe. TCU is, what are they in the rankings? 27 and Clemson 24. So a couple of pretty evenly matched teams, but I do think Clemson from let me pull this up here. Yeah. Clemson's average win so far in their 8-0 season is 118 in the VCI. TCU's undefeated season, their best win is 170, and their average win is 299. TCU has played absolutely no one so far this year.
Their schedule is a joke. Like, it's crazy.
Oh, yeah. What is going on? Hold on. Let me see this. Yeah. I am going to. Oh, wow. We've got ourselves a 3-point advantage here as well. Clemson, 8th in the country in 3-point percentage, and they're going to get their threes up. They're shooting threes on 40% of their possessions. TCU never shoots the three. And TCU takes away the three. They're 20th in attempts, but when you do get a three against them, it's an open look. They're 284th in 3-point percentage. The line here, actually, we do have a line. This is a pick 'em. I'm going to have to take Clemson here, just solely on the strength of schedule that Clemson has so far. Clemson's proved it to me. TCU, I think, is overhyped here. I mean, they survived Georgetown, who is not good at all on a buzzer beater. Clemson already has wins over on the road at Alabama and Pitt. They just won a home game over South Carolina in that rivalry game, and a previously undefeated South Carolina team. If you're just going to give me pick 'em in this one, I think I have to take Clemson.
Yeah, no side for me in this one, but excited to see what TCU is. Like, we previewed them before the season. They have a lot of talent on that roster in the backcourt and the front court, but they haven't played anyone. And it's also just like a weird game, like TCU and Clemson playing in Canada. I don't know. Just maybe.
And we've talked about this too. Like, I don't think TCU's offense is by itself very good, but they're 10th in turnovers. So a lot of their offense is coming off those turnovers, getting out in transition. And that's why they're 7th in 2-point, because I'm sure they're getting a lot of steals and just taking them down for layups. Clemson's 42nd in turnover. They're not turning the ball over. And there's not that, we talked about this in the Iowa State game, where the crowd is something that can get going and make a team who's got low turnover numbers against a team who's solid defensively on turnovers flip that. I think Clemson takes care of the ball. I think Clemson runs their offense and gets good looks here. I think TCU is just, you got to prove it to me. And if you're going to give me pick 'em against a team who has proven it, I'm not even going to look too much at what the data, like the stats show, because those stats for TCU are against a bunch of terrible teams, and Clemson's done it against good teams. So add a Clemson pick 'em to my list of bets so far.
Yep.
And that really is the last of the odds. The rest of the games, UCLA is playing Villanova in Philly.
Wells Fargo Center. Yeah.
That'll be interesting. I mean, Villanova's got to win, but I would think UCLA has a great chance to win that game. I think UCLA is pretty good.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what the line's going to be. Like, Villanova has done nothing to instill confidence, but that's going to be a big test for UCLA and that young team going on the road. It's going to be a fun matchup. Definitely one to tune into.
Indiana versus Auburn. I think this one's pretty interesting because Auburn, we've been high on them, but they lost to Appalachian State on the road. Indiana's a team who, to me, is getting not a lot of respect by anyone, both by the computers and just by people in the media. Indiana's 68th in our VCI, so like we're on the bandwagon of not respecting them.
Yeah.
Their only losses to UConn. They're 7-1. They've beaten Maryland. They started Big Ten play with wins against Michigan and Maryland. That Maryland win coming on the road. This Auburn team, the number 19th in the VCI, we still like Auburn. I think when you watch them play, they're appeasing to the eye and the style of play that they have. But where's this game? Neutral floor game in Atlanta, so kind of a home game for Auburn. But Indiana's one. They're going under the radar, which is kind of surprising for a blue blood program like Indiana.
Yeah. One thing they're going to have an issue with, though, is their 3-point shooting in this one. They're 349th in the country in 3-point percentage, 360th in 3-point attempts. So they're just horrendous from behind the line. And then Auburn's number 20 in the country at defending the 3-point line. So I don't know, under maybe? Like, I know, and Auburn, surprisingly, like, you think of Auburn as being a really fast team. They're 169th. They're middle of the road this year in pace. Maybe just blind under for me.
Yeah. And I think that Auburn, we only have the overall pace, and just checking Ken Palm here, 32nd in offensive pace, but 341st in defensive pace. So that's why they're kind of middle of the road overalls. Yeah, they get the ball and they want to run. But on the defensive side, they're going to get back and they're going to slow you down. So we'll see what that line is. I still believe in this Auburn team. I think Appalachian State's actually pretty good. They're number 1 in the entire country in defensive field goal percentage. So that was a tough road game that they went and played. I'm not going to hold that loss against them. And I think that's one of those where if you just looked at, we may get a favorable line tomorrow for Auburn off of that Appalachian State loss, because people are going to go, oh, they lost to Appalachian State. Maybe they suck. No, that Appalachian State team's pretty good. They're literally the best defense in the country. Yeah. So that's a tough road game to play. And I'm sure the Appalachian State crowd, that's got to be one of the best road opponents or home games that Appalachian State will ever have. So I'm not going to hold that loss against Auburn. I expect them to bounce back tomorrow. We'll see what those odds are. All right, we talked a lot of games. That had to be 8-10 games that we got, and that just speaks to speaks volumes about the strength of the slate tomorrow. There's going to be betting opportunities across the board. I mean, if we don't bet a lot of the mid majors, we like to stay focused on the teams that we know. But there's got to be 100-some games tomorrow. So get to cbb.vincerix.com. We'll put a video out tomorrow, probably, or also on TikTok. So far, I'm taking Arizona -7.5, BYU -4, Oklahoma -3.5, and Clemson in the pick'em against TCU. But I think I'll probably add 3-4 bets tomorrow because I'm going to be watching basketball all day.
Yeah, fill it up. Great slate tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hunter. We'll be back next week because of how awesome these games are this weekend. We're going to have a lot to unpack, get a lay of the land heading into another week of college basketball. The slate next week, honestly, not that great. A lot of teams, I think, playing big games this Saturday are going to take a little bit of time off before another great set of games next weekend. Arizona, Purdue, Kentucky, North Carolina, Baylor, Michigan State, Alabama, Creighton. So enjoy this weekend. You'll have some time off during the week because it's not going to be nothing special next week, but then the weekend will pick up again after that. We will talk to you on Monday, and follow on Twitter and TikTok for some of those videos over the weekend.
Yep.